Welcome, ladies and gents. It is Friday evening. It is the football Insomniac, and more importantly, it is the day of the big game. Thousands are making their way to Wembley, but for those that aren't, come and tune in to this next half hour, and we'll take you through the preview of what is arguably the biggest game of the tournament so far. It's Scotland v England, and I'm delighted to be joined by Paul John Dykes. Paul, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thanks for asking me on. I've been waiting on the invite for a while, but obviously you must be desperate tonight, Colin, because you've asked me on eventually. It's one of these ones where, obviously like everybody else, I've been watching it unfold, and to be honest with you, I'm quite happy that I'm not down there. I'm quite happy that I'm watching it from afar, and that's not because I don't have belief or support of the Scottish team, but just under the circumstances, I'd quite happily just sit in the comfort in my own home and watch it this time round. I've been seeing the fans down there enjoying themselves, many of whom obviously won't be in the game, watching it live. But it's one of these ones, Colin, where all week and since the beginning of the tournament, all I've been seeing is that goal from Paul Gascoigne time and time again.
Yep.
And that was a tournament, I'm sure you'll ask me, but that was a tournament I was really, really invested in. It's one that I remember vividly. And looking back on the performances of that tournament and how close we were to qualifying is what really irks me. I mean, I never just focus on that England game when I look back on the tournament. I look at the three games as a whole and just how close we were to pipping a fine Netherlands side to the qualification place. But as I say, it's typical that that's all we've been getting over the last few weeks. But, until we create our own memories, where's our memories other than the obvious wee Griffiths, who isn't part of the squad, unfortunately. But again, we might talk about that.
Yeah, we'll cover that. And if you are watching along, we're live today on Facebook, on YouTube and on Twitter. Do get involved. We will bring your comments up on the screen. Give us your score predictions of what you think the score will be tonight. Just like Dub has come in to do, he thinks it'll be a 5-each draw. So we'll look forward. Hopefully that'll be a good one. But let's start now. Paul, there has been a leaked team. Now, we're unsure if this is 100% the team, but this has come from a source at Wembley Stadium today. And the team, which is alleged to be true, is Marshall in goal, a back three of Hanley, Hendry and Tierney, James Forrest at right wing-back, Andy Robertson at left wing-back, McGinn, McGregor and McTominay in the middle of the park, and Stuart Armstrong playing off Che Adams. First of all, what's your reaction to that team?
I don't think if that is the team, I don't think any of the three who were taken off and who don't start tonight are going to have any complaints. When you look at, Dykes, Christie and O'Donnell, and I know that Clark was very defensive of O'Donnell's performance, but I think he might have made that change anyway, Colin. I think he's maybe looking at the lineup, obviously with, you ask yourself, where are the weaknesses in England's side, and it's quite difficult to find any, but if someone's playing out of position, it might be a wee chink in the armour. So I think he would have made that change in any case. But he was obviously very defensive of Stephen O'Donnell. And, if Kieran Tierney's fit, he plays. So if you're going to feel sorry for anybody, it's probably Liam Cooper for dropping out, because Tierney's going to be one of the first names on the team sheet. And looking at that, it's the strongest side Scotland can line up with. And I know that there's been a lot of talk all around, in particular Billy Gilmour, giving him a game and this kind of thing. And I think that, Stevie Clark needs to play a wee bit safer than that tonight. And when you're looking at what we're up against, and we know the quality of England. I was talking earlier about my frustrations in some quarters of the media and how they go on about the Gascoigne goal and all that. But I think that when you look at the side and the quality they've got all over the park, Clark needs to play to his strengths. And we know that his teams have been built on the defensive qualities. Think back to his first two games in charge of Kelly, Colin. Yep. He played Rangers and Celtic, and he got 2 draws. And I remember being at the game against Celtic and watching how he, shaped up that side, and it was very difficult to play against. I think that's what he's going to do tonight.
Do you know, it is one of the things that Steve Clark's almost is known for, is how he makes his teams difficult to beat. Now, if this side is alleged to be true, then it does look as if that's kind of went out the window and it is all-out attack from Scotland. And to be fair, when you compare it to the side that played on Monday night, that was something that a lot of fans were saying, well, we got it wrong there. It was a kind of very defensive lineup that we had on Monday. In fact, I was speaking to Glenn Schroeder from the Red Tinted Glasses podcast and Aberdeen podcast, and he described it as a very Derek McInnes lineup, setting up for the draw and ending up with a defeat. Now, that's the way it kind of looked when you look at that side. Now, to me, the biggest scapegoat that's come out of the game on Monday, is Stephen O'Donnell. Mm-hmm. Now, there was a lot of discussion on whether Nathan Patterson would come in, and I think Nathan Patterson's a young player who has a fantastic future ahead of him. But if we go with that lineup, it looks as though James Forrest is in at the right wing-back position. Do you think that's a position that Forrest is comfortable in, or do you think that's something England will try and exploit this evening?
I think that he'll be comfortable because Scotland will play to his strengths, Colin. We know that, defensively, his strengths are not going to lie in that area of the park. But, going back to the game, actually, you were speaking there about the reference to McInnes. Looking back on that game after a few days to digest it, and yeah, it was a very disappointing scoreline, but I don't think that we were as bad as maybe initially was made out, to be honest with you. I think that there are very, very small margins at this level, and Scotland were shown up for just being that bit short, Colin. When you look at, for large areas of that game, we dominated possession, and I know that doesn't win you games, and it obviously didn't on this occasion. But when you look at the chances that were created as well, and again, looking at Celtic for the last 10 games of last season, where a lot of chances were created, we also know that doesn't win you games. But 19 shots at goal, and on any other day, you would expect to at least score, Colin, And I think that the fact that many of the best chances, if not all the best chances, fell to the feet of Lyndon Dykes was unfortunate, because, we do have other strikers at our disposal who are probably a wee bit more decisive at that kind of level. And then when you look at the goals, the real sucker punch, we all know what a goal just before half-time does for any team. Mm-hmm. And then the second one, it was of our own making. It was self-imposed. And you look, and I think when I look at the sides that lines up Czech Republic and Scotland, what they had in their favour was the man who scored the brace. And you look at the fact that we do have some of that kind of, that sparkle to the team, but it's not in the kind of offensive areas. It's McGinn, it's Robertson, it's Tierney, but they've got a player there who, if you were to look at, and again, you can't regard players based on their transfer fees. This is a guy who's changed hands and loans and transfer fees for over 60 million quid. He's scored goals in Italy, he's scored goals in Germany. He's probably scored the goal of the tournament. So if I'm trying to be as balanced as I possibly can, after the disappointment of the defeat, which may mean that we won't progress in this tournament unless we see something special tonight, it wasn't as bad as a lot of people have been making out, I don't think.
Interesting you say about the progression, as Croatia just equalised. It's now 1 each in the game between Croatia and Czech Republic, which gives the Croatians their first point if it stays as it is. And it could mean that the big game is actually on Tuesday night. When Scotland play Croatia at Hampden, it could be a winner takes all. But going back to the Scotland thing, there's a couple of talking points that came out the game on Monday night, and you mentioned Patrick Schick there. Now he's also went on and scored today for the Czech Republic from the penalty spot, 3 goals in the tournament so far, and it does feel as though Scotland don't have that sort of Schick type up front. There's not someone that they can turn to and say, well, he's going to score me a goal every other game.
No, there isn't a striker in the squad. There isn't a striker in the squad. And the big arguments, obviously, and we need to get over it, it's Lee Griffiths is, for me, the best Scottish striker we have at our disposal. But for other matters, mainly due to his own discipline or indiscipline, he's not there. So we've kind of got to go over it. But you're absolutely right. That's where we fall down. And I know that we speak about other tournaments, and I'm old enough, Colin, to remember a few that you think back to. Mexico 86, look at the strikers we had at our disposal as a nation back then. Brian McClair wasn't in the squad. He hadn't been capped by that stage, but he was scoring prolifically for Celtic. You've got Maurice Johnston, Frank McAvenny, Stevie Archibald, Alan McCoy scoring goals for Rangers. Kenny Dalglish, who was left at home. all of these people in and around the Scotland squad, every single one of them was a match winner. And you look at what we've got now, and you're kind of struggling for that. And I think that was the difference. That was the big difference against the Czech Republic. I think the way that we line up today, as you say, it looks like an attacking kind of lineup. But if you try and go toe-to-toe with England, Colin, that could be, that really could get a wee bit embarrassing, I think. And I think Stevie Clarke needs to play to his strengths.
Well, it is interesting you say that, because we're going to take a look at this England team, and we expect a couple of changes to come in. Daniel James and Luke Shaw coming in the wing-back positions. It does look as though Stones and Mings will stay at centre-half, with Rice and Phillips just playing in front of them. Now, if you look at that squad, it is a squad that's blessed with a lot of natural talent. You're looking at guys like Harry Kane up front, who's scored umpteen amount of goals. Sterling, Foden, Mount, all guys that have played at the highest level. So where are England's weaknesses? Where can Scotland try and exploit? And for me, I think it is that back four.
You know, the thing for me, Colin, we've not seen any of the teams yet. They've not been confirmed, have they? But no. the player that impresses me out of all the guys that you've mentioned is Calvin Phillips. You know, yes. I think they're calling him the Yorkshire Pirlo, aren't they? And I think he's a guy that, if given the time, and I don't think he'll be given the time, because I think we've got strong midfield players. If given the time, he could orchestrate the entire game. Again, Harry Kane, for me, he looks subdued. For large parts of England's opening game, and again, that could lead you into a false sense of security, Colin, but it's something to look out for. And I also think that you can't underestimate, because you've constantly got, with English football and with the England national team, another conveyor belt of young players coming through. And we've seen, obviously, Jude Bellingham coming on, 17 years of age.
Yeah, fantastic talent.
Outrageous, and just before him, Marcus Rashford's done that, and they've always got that. Wayne Rooney in the past. There's always a conveyor belt of young guys coming through. Don't forget Raheem Sterling, because you look at his record in the last 17 games for England, and he's been directly involved in 19 goals in 17 games. So as well as the new breed coming through, you've still got these guys who have established themselves. Weaknesses, yeah, I guess so, but your defence is only a weakness if you're up against a decent forward line. And we've just spoken about the fact that that's where we really lack. I think back to some of the striking partnerships or some of the strikers we've had in the past, and they would have given that English defence nightmares. I don't think they'll be too concerned looking at some of the striking options Scotland have got at the moment. The biggest thing for me, for England, the biggest weakness will be frustration. I'm not even going to say complacency, because Gareth Southgate will not allow complacencies to creep into his side. But what might happen is, if you can frustrate that England side, that at their home ground, which, by the way, Jude Bellingham calls Wembo, which I'm not having that, right?
No,
but that I think would be key, and that will become a weakness, is the frustration. So if you can, go 60 minutes, and you can keep it tight, which I think Scotland are capable of, that will be key.
Now, we're going to look back at some of the memories of previous games against England. I'll look back at the only victory over England that I can actually remember in my lifetime, which is a sad reflection on how things are. But just before we go to that, looking at this Scotland team, we mentioned someone who looks as if he's going to come back into the side. And for me, I think he is key to any sort of success that Scotland have today, and that's Kieran Tierney. Obviously injured on Monday against the Czech Republic. You noticed that Robertson, he didn't have that partnership down the left-hand side. A lot was relying on him going forward. Yeah. We've always spoke about the fact that it's taken Scotland 20-odd years to create a world-class player, and then we get two in the same position. But we seem to find a way to be able to accommodate Tierney and Robertson in this side. And when I look back at the warm-up game against the Netherlands, everything that was good from Scotland came down that left-hand side, with either Robertson overlapping Tierney or Tierney doing the same to Robertson. And having him back in this team tonight, that is a massive bonus.
It is, and Stevie Clarke's found a way, Colin. It's as simple as that. He's looked at it and thought to himself, I've got to play both of them, and the team will work around that, and he's found a way. But there's other areas in that Scotland side as well that I'm hugely impressed by. You look at the makeup of the side as well, the side that started the first game, 8 players all playing in England. with only two playing their domestic football in Scotland, and of course Jack Hendry still currently playing his football in Belgium. We're not sure how that one's going to work out, but he probably will be playing his football in Belgium. And I think that's key, Colin. If you're the international manager, and you've got a choice between two players, and one of them is playing at that level and playing well and consistently at that level, then they're going to start. And I think that, players like David Turnbull, who I've been hugely impressed with all season, and who I would like to see at some stage in this tournament, are up against it when you're trying to break into a side with the likes of McGinn, McTominay, Armstrong. These guys are playing at a completely different level, let's be honest. And I think that is key, but it's been key for a long time. The 86 side that I spoke about, the Mexico 86 side, you and the teams before that, you had a bulk of players that were playing down south. And I always remember looking through the programmes. My dad was a Scotland fan as well as a Celtic fan, used to go to all the games. And you would look at the programmes and, ask yourself, why are all these Scottish players playing elsewhere? But I mean, there's another player in 86 that I forgot to mention, Charlie Nicholas, who was actually part of that squad. We had a wealth of talent, and most of the players were down south, so it's not a new phenomenon. And you look at what Clark's got at his disposal, the one key area that you would hope to have a player banging in the goals would be up front, and we've not got it. He's gone with Dykes, and I think Dykes has served him well, Colin, I really do. But if there's going to be a change tonight and it's Dykes, I'd be happy with that. So the league team, did you reckon it was?
Adams playing off Armstrong playing off Adams.
Adams starting. Yeah, I would go with that. I definitely would go with that.
Yeah, again, it's someone with Premier League experience, and he's done it at that level, so it is a good addition to have to the team. You look at the team that the players that are in the Premier League. You're talking about Tierney, Robertson, McGinn, Gilmore, McTominay, Armstrong, Adams. There is a sort of core of that team that's playing in the Premier League. Now, I don't necessarily think the Premier League's the best league in the world, but when you're looking at picking players for a Scotland pool, you want them to be playing to the highest possible standard, and the English Premier League is one of the best leagues in the world. So it's great that we've got players playing week in, week out for their team in that league, and then you can transfer that into the national team.
Well, you compare it to tonight's opponents. You compare it to the England squad. So, I mean, the team that started their first game, just having a quick look at that, there was only one player who didn't play their domestic football in England, and that was Kieran Trippier, who obviously plays in Spain, doesn't he? So, so you've got 8 players playing up against 10 players, all competing in the same league at the same level. So, you can't go more toe-to-toe than that, Colin. That's the way that I kind of view it. But I think it's always been the way with Scottish football. You were talking about previous memories against England, and the one that you were referring to. Talk us through that, the one victory that you can remember.
So it's Don Hutchison and the 1-0 victory at Wembley. I believe that was the last game that was played at Wembley before the Towers came down. Already 2-0 down from the first leg, and then Don Hutchison scores a penalty, although he crash out 2-1. That is the only victory over England that I believe has taken place in my lifetime, that I can remember anyway. So we're looking at 93 onwards. But for yourself, Paul, what does this fixture mean to you? Now, you've obviously said that your dad went to all the games, but growing up, obviously Scotland and England played a lot more regularly than what they do now. It was almost a yearly part of the calendar, wasn't it?
The Rouse Cup, my dad probably went for the jolly, to be honest with you. So I'm looking at all these guys and girls going down to the game yesterday and today, and that's what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about the hijinks that they'll be up to, and the hijinks that my old man was probably up to as well. But it's not something I was ever involved in, I've got to be honest. I've always just been focused in terms of going to the games on Celtic. I've been... But Scotland are my team, they're my national side. But growing up for a great period of that time when Scotland haven't been in the tournament, you've got to look elsewhere. And I've always supported the Republic of Ireland when they're in the finals. And 5 years ago, Wales, watching that incredible journey. And I'll say that just now, if and when Scotland go out, then Wales will be my team. I'll adopt Wales. They'll be my team, and I hope that they do as well as possible as well, because obviously Mark Hughes and Mark Bowen, of course. But the Scotland-England fixture...
There's a podcast when you don't name them people.
When we look at the fixture, I can't remember, and somebody will correct me in the comments, certainly my lifetime, I was born in 78, so, I can't remember the 82 finals, although I was born. 86 is kind of vague. 88, remember it well, but Scotland weren't in it. 1990, and so forth. But I can't remember getting an absolute pasting from England. I've always, we've always competed with England. We've never been absolutely embarrassed, if you know what I mean. If you look at the games previously, and there was a period of time there where we stopped playing the traditional games that you mentioned earlier, the ones that were regular, and that was due to kind of crowd trouble. And then it was all down to, will we draw them in the tournament? And of course, the famous one, going back to 96, which I've already mentioned, was the 2-0 game. But I don't look at that tournament and focus on the England game. I remember it vividly. I've said this to Kev before. I remember the jeans I was wearing that day. I remember how sunny. I remember it vividly, Colin. And that tournament as well, I do recall that tournament vividly. But what annoys me about it is the fact that we were so close. I mean, we were so close to going through. Exact same goal difference as the Netherlands. The game against the Netherlands, of course, was 0-0 because it would have came down to the head-to-head. That was nothing each. So it then went to goals scored. And the Netherlands had scored more than us. Scotland had only scored 1 goal. So that was really frustrating because I think that was the one moment where we came so close in my lifetime. Other people of another era might cite 1974 as being a great Scotland side that should have progressed in the tournament. And I don't think we're anywhere near that just now, I've got to say. But when you actually look at the lineups, though, Colin, you look at the Scotland lineups from that tournament, and there's players in there, and I think that a great deal of credit has to go to, I would guess, would need to go to the manager, Craig Brown, and what he got out of that side. So the team that lined up to play the Netherlands, Andy Gorham in goal, Stuart McKimmie, Colin Calderwood, Colin Hendry, Tom Boyd, Stuart McCall, Gary McAllister, John Collins, Gordon Dury, Kevin Gallagher, and Scott Booth. Now, by no means is that the greatest Scotland side you've ever seen, but they went toe-to-toe with a very strong Netherlands side, and they drew nothing each. And what I remember from that game more than anything was the performance of John Collins. John Collins was outstanding in that game, absolutely brilliant. And then we followed that up by obviously playing England, and they beat us 2-0. And the one thing that I just don't understand about the lineup is that we actually played John Spencer against England. Now, I have no recollection of that. And as I've said to Kevin before, I could tell you the jeans I was wearing, but I couldn't tell you John Spencer was actually playing. And I think that was an error. And I've got to say this, I think we should have started with Ali McCoist. McCoist then starts the last game when we beat Switzerland 1-0, and he scores our only goal of the tournament. So we made a mistake there, I think, in not playing Ali McCoist against England. And I think we made a similar mistake a few years earlier at the 1990 World Cup in the opening game against Costa Rica. The famous story goes that Ali McCoist started stripping to start because Andy Roxburgh had said that Nally was going to start, and he meant Alan McInally, and not Ali. So Ali was on the bench, and we know what happened against Costa Rica. So that was a frustrating tournament for me. But I remember also the songs, and I hate Three Lions, and I hear people going on about, but it's a great song. It's not. I think the Lightning Seeds are absolutely rotten, and I think that song's rotten. And Scotland had a song, and I talk about this all the time because I think it's the best final song of all time. It was Primal Scream, featuring Irvin Welsh and On You Sound, and this is the title of the song that was banned by UEFA. The big man in the Scream team meet the Barmy Army uptown, and there was loads of expletives and everything else, as you can imagine. And that was an unofficial Scotland song back in 1996. And by the way, I would have it every day of the week over this nonsense, Yes Sir I Can Boogie, which if I never hear that song again, it'll be too soon. And it's about time one of the great Scottish bands that we have at our disposal writes a decent song again. And I'm going to put forward Mogwai to write a 16-minute instrumental for the next tournament.
We've got Dan Costaglov B coming in saying, I'm English with a Geordie. Yeah, that's Northern England. And I hate Three Lions, entitled rubbish. I've got to agree, I'm not a big fan of any of the big England hits. Do you remember Anton Deck did the song for the 2002 World Cup, We're on the Ball?
That was rotten as well.
That was rotten as well. Now, I do think that the Yes Sir I Can Boogie thing, it's definitely been attached to this qualification, and it's a positive sort of happy song. So I don't have that much of a gripe against it. But what I do have to say is, a great Scottish band, La Fontaines, they actually used the beat to create their own song for the tournament, which was a very good one. If you've not heard that,
Colin,
go and listen to it.
I'm not being negative here, right? And you know I love my music, right? But my eyes started to bleed when I watched that video, mate. My eyes were bleeding and my ears weren't far behind it. We need better than that. We need a right good Scottish band to write the next tune, mate, because it's important, you know, because if you're going for the party, this Yes Sir I Can Boogie nonsense, give me a break. I'm not having it. I am not having that. I'm not having Jude Bellingham calling Wembley Wembo. Absolutely no chance.
Is this you becoming a Scotland da? Is this what it is?
Yes.
A Scotland da? We'll go with that. Now, the kick-off is just over 90 minutes away, and we'll be wrapping up here in the last couple of minutes, and it's been great to get a lot of the comments coming in. David Kelly coming in saying, Germany fans out singing It's Coming Home when they beat them in the semi-final was hilarious. Shippy67 coming in to say, come on, Paul, get that boogie on. I'm sure if Scotland win, you'll definitely be boogieing. Come on.
Listen, I've had 2 Red Bulls today, Colin, so I'm feeling a wee bit kind of agitated. There is no way you'll ever catch me singing or dancing to that song.
Francie Nobel, you coming in saying Delamitri Mark II.
Don't come home too soon. I remember it well, yes. Was that no filmed at Prestwick Airport? I'm sure it was. I'm sure it was filmed at Prestwick, yes, which was the only place in Scotland that Elvis ever set foot in.
Yeah, it's still got the bar there's named the Elvis Lounge or something like that because it was the only place he went.
Talking of Elvis, did you see Stephen Presley getting interviewed earlier?
Talks through his teeth. I can't listen to him.
He still thinks there's the lockdown restrictions when it comes to the hairdos. Shambolic.
There's a couple of that. I seen Colin Hendry on the news the other day, and I think his haircut's about 3 years overdue.
Well, let's talk about that then, right? Not about his hair, because obviously it's the same hairstyle as he had back then, a bit like myself. No, in fact, I had a Sean Ryder in 1996. I was 6 years out of step. I'm now only 20. I'm only 20 years out of step. But when we talk about that game against England, right, and you get all the usual cliches and the 3 lions and the dentist chair and Gaza and all this nonsense, right? And people go on about the penalty miss, and rightly so, it was a bad penalty. It was a poor penalty, right? And I think Colin should have taken it, to be honest with you, right? Because I mean, Collins was an absolute expert with the dead ball, and he showed his nerve, didn't he, in 1998 against Brazil a couple of years later. Cool customer as a player. I loved him, but you've got to talk about Colin Hendry's part in that goal against Paul Gascoigne.
It's interesting because he was on the news saying that it didn't matter if he slipped or not, Gaza would have still scored.
That's a good attitude. That's a good attitude.
I don't buy that at all. I don't buy that at all. He made a complete pig's ear of it. And it's something that stuck with him the rest of his career.
Is it?
I would say so.
Yeah, well, he signed for Rangers, so it all went downhill after that. You're right.
Now,
you're absolutely right.
You can't talk about that penalty miss without talking about the person who claims to have deliberately moved the ball before McAllister kicked it, Yuri Geller. Now, he's come out and saying he's want to try and level up the scores. First of all, do you think he had anything at all to do with it? And 2, is he just trying to get himself back in the press?
Well, he has become a bit of a non-entity. I mean, imagine the only thing you were known for was bending spoons. You know, that's Uri Geller. The same Uri Geller, I think, who was big mates with Michael Jackson, wasn't he? He ended up at Fulham. Yeah. And he was sitting behind the goals trying to bend penalties past the post and everything. It's absolute nonsense, mate. And obviously there was a tweet last night about it. You can go longer the night if you want. There was a tweet last night about it. Tom English was going on about it. It was the biggest load of nonsense that he's heard all year. I wouldn't go as far to say that, but yeah, a whole load of nonsense. Uri Geller had nothing to do with it. I remember, right, there was a book in my house. There was quite a few good books in my house when I was younger. There was a book on the craze, which I devoured time and time again. There was a few good books on Irish history, which my dad introduced me to. And there was a book, strangely enough, on Uri Geller. And I remember reading this book, and the guy was talking about bending spoons, Colin. And 40 years later, I still think that he's a strange one. He's one to watch.
He's trying to get back in the front pages of the paper. He says he's going to try and move the ball again tonight. Now, the ball does move, but it wasn't the best of pitch at Wembley either. So there's every chance that was what actually happened.
Was he behind the goals when Roberto Carlos scored that free kick as well?
We spoke about this on the Insomniac a couple of weeks ago. That ball is unbelievable. It starts, and if you look at it, the ball boy behind the goal actually ducks out the road because he thinks it's still hitting him. Now, Roberto Carlos was asked about that, and he says, so what is it? Did you look at the angle? Did you look at physics? What was it? And he says, I just hit it hard.
Good. I like that. Was he wearing Predators?
I think
was Gary McAllister. Was Gary McAllister? No, Predators came out in 1994, mate.
Was it 94? Is that how
1994, yeah, the first edition. Craig Johnston, ex-Liverpool player. He designed them. The Australian. If you want to talk about Australia a wee bit more.
Well, speaking about Australia, it does look as though Celtic manager Ange Postecoglou is there at the game tonight with Celtic's chief executive Dominic Mackay. So those for the Celtic fans watching, that'll be an interesting one. Maybe you'll see him pop up on the big screen. Now, Paul, we're just coming up to the half hour, so it would be a miss not to get a score prediction off you for tonight's game. Now, I'm still checking to see if
you're still thinking about McAllister's penalty when you say it would be a miss.
Yeah. I'm still looking to see if the team is out yet, but it doesn't look as though it is. So we'll continue by looking at the team that looks to have been leaked. If that is the team, how do you think Scotland will go on tonight?
It's the best team we can possibly line up with, and it will take a miraculous effort tonight. You know, it'll be one of those historic events this evening, Colin, if Scotland were to win the game. And I think most observers realise that. You know, it's not that I'm a pessimistic individual, I'm not. But I just think that when you look at it realistically, England, I feel, have more in their tank than what they showed in their opening fixture. I think there's a few gears they can go up. They've also got a very strong bench as well, Colin, regardless of who starts, haven't they? Mm-hmm. And I think it would be a tremendous performance by Scotland, but also England wouldn't have, be at their best, and then this frustration kicks in, and when that collides, when those two worlds collide, then you might get something out of the game. But I think the best that we could possibly hope for tonight, and I'm not being pessimistic, is a 0-0 draw.
Well, I'm going to go one step forward. I do think the best that we can get tonight will be a draw, but I think we're going to score, and I think it's going to be one of those moments that a generation lives off of. I mean, when was it? The last goal in a European Championships, it's McCoist against Switzerland, isn't it? 96?
Yeah.
Is that right? Yep. Yeah. McCoist against Switzerland. Now, I was 2 years old at that point. So my memory of that, I've not seen Scotland score at a major European finals. Whoever does get that goal tonight, that'll be one that goes into the history books and one that could totally change a generation of fans and get them to back the national team. So I'm going for a 1-each draw. And do you know what?
Who's scoring the goal? Who's scoring the goal, Colin?
Super John McGinn. I'm going for a John McGinn strike tonight.
I hope you're right. You're going to ask me about anybody else that I fancy for the tournament? I mean, who do you fancy?
I've got to say, watching the tournament so far, I think the two teams that have really impressed me have been Italy and France. Mm-hmm. I think Italy's two back-to-back 3-0 victories show what they can do going forward. Plus, I think they're now 9 or 10 games without conceding a goal. So that could be
the Catenaccio. What about Belgium?
I'm not sure about Belgium. I think they had a great performance against Russia, but I do think when you look at that game last night against Denmark, 2-1 victory, they had to come back into it. I think if they come up against the likes of a France or a Portugal, they could struggle. I think they are vulnerable at the back. Jason Denayer kind of showed that after a couple of minutes yesterday. What about yourself? Who do you fancy for the tournament?
Well, I'm not going to write Belgium off. Obviously, we've got the Denayer and Boyata and Castagne and Martinez and Maloney and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not going to write them off. I'm watching, as I say, with interest, and I'm not for a moment suggesting that they're going to win, but I'm watching the Wales journey, and I'll support them if and when Scotland go out. But I think you're right. When you're looking at these nations that are savvy, they're so savvy in the tournaments. Even when you look at France, they're the type of team, Colin, that might not impress you in every single game, but they'll get the results, and you know that, and they'll be there or thereabouts. And obviously, I've been watching Portugal as well, and I think I don't think they'll be kind of last four, but I always enjoy watching them. And you know what you're watching at the moment, Colin, is you're watching world class players coming to the end of their careers as well. So just enjoy it, you know. And the whole Ronaldo thing, love him or loathe him, and people go, oh, the real Ronaldo and the fat Ronaldo and all that. And by the way, he was some player, the Brazilian.
Oh, definitely, yep.
But, you know, the guy's fantastic, and the dedication that he's shown to his craft, even going as far as not drinking the fizzy stuff and going for the aqua and all that. So, yeah, I'll enjoy it.
That was nothing at all to do with that. That was a sponsorship thing.
Of course it was, aye. Of course it was. But these are the things that every single tournament you could say the same, couldn't you? Italy, France, you know, you could go through the same kind of four teams. And it all comes down, as I say, to margins. I said that at the beginning of the show. It's tiny, tiny margins. And I think it'll be margins tonight as well.
Yeah, and I think when you look at that French squad, the strength and depth is ridiculous. I mean, they can sub in and sub out, and it's almost as if the standard of the team remains at a constant level. And that's what they need to get through the tournament. Also, if anyone hasn't seen the French World Cup celebrations in the Parc de France after they won the World Cup, when the players are dancing around the stadium, that is definitely a video to go and check out after this. But yeah, Scotland versus England tonight, 8 p.m. Keep it on mute. I think there's Radio Scotland and Clyde One are also covering it, so listen to that instead of listening to these pundits that are going to tell you.
Go on. Bring up YouTube and bring on Primal Scream with Irvin Welsh and play that song. Play that song.
Play that song for the whole hour.
Rather than Yes Sir I Can Boogie, because that is chronic.
Well, everyone's got their own personal taste, Paul. But yeah, a massive good luck to Scotland tonight. Let's hope that they can produce a result. The first victory since 1999. That would be incredible. 23 years that we've waited to get there. Let's go out there and restore a bit of national pride. Also, before we wrap up, I just found out before we came on air that Christian Eriksen has been released from hospital, which is fantastic news. I don't know, Paul, if you managed to see that. The Denmark game, it was a real shame.
Oh, it was horrific, I know. It was just terrible, wasn't it? And, you know, a stark reminder. And I think, you know, when you're watching that and you're hoping and praying, and then a few days later you get that kind of news call, and it's tremendous. So hopefully it makes a full recovery.
Yeah, and we wish him all the best here from a state of mind.
Look at that. Has he just changed his name? Yes,
no,
Sir,
he's been in the whole time, but if that winds you up, then I'll say he just done it. But no, thank you to everyone who's joined us this evening. We'll be back next Friday for a full episode of the Football Insomniac when Sean, who's currently at Wembley tonight, will be joining us. So
has he got a ticket?
I'm not sure if he has or not, but he nearly didn't have any accommodation. Check out his State of the Euros podcast from Tuesday when he discusses that. Thank you to everyone who has got involved. Good luck to Scotland tonight. We're not going to say good luck to England because we don't want good luck to them, even if we do have some English fans watching. So good luck to Scotland. And here, hopefully, comes 3 points tonight. Take care. See you all next week.